And in this lawsuit, he claims that essentially P. Diddy was the Epstein of the rap industry.
Well, either way, if you got to run to a private island because your evil doings are doing so much and they storming your house, it's one of these.
It's no secret that Sean Diddy Combs has been a giant in the world of music and entertainment for decades. But behind his shiny, glamorous lifestyle and the millions he's raked in, there's a much darker side to the story. A side that's been whispered about for years, but only now is starting to come to light. His rise to fame was meteoric, but as they say, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. And Diddy, well, he might be on the verge of one of the biggest falls we've seen in Hollywood.
You're just like, it's there. I mean, it's not just there. It's everywhere. My news feed is dominated by it. Fox News, CNN, everyone. There's raids at Diddy's house.
Let's rewind a bit. Diddy was a hustler from day one. He knew how to play the game, and he played it well. Starting as an intern at Uptown Records, he quickly climbed the ranks, eventually launching his own label, Bad Boy Records, and becoming one of the most powerful figures in the music industry. We're talking about a guy who helped shape the careers of some of the biggest names in hip-hop. The Notorious B.I.G., Faith Evans, and Mace, just to name a few. He wasn't just a producer. He became a cultural icon, someone who defined what it meant to be successful in the rap game. He had it all, the fame, the fortune, the influence. But with all that power came an undercurrent of controversy that's been bubbling beneath the surface for years.
So I would imagine if you're the CIA, you're like, okay, we're looking for people who have gone through these things in their life that have curated this kind of like personality type.
Well, isn't it just like part of the gig? Like here's a for instance, like your bit about Puffy.
What many people don't realize is that Diddy's empire wasn't built on charm alone. There's been a lot of talk, and not just within the industry, that Diddy's success was in large part due to his ruthless business tactics. Take Bad Boy Records, for example. Sure, Diddy launched the careers of huge stars, but how many of them ended up trapped in contracts that favored him and left the artists struggling? Mace, one of the biggest rappers of the 90s, has been very vocal about how Diddy kept him financially dependent on the label. According to Mace, he tried to buy back his publishing rights for $2 million, money that Diddy, a billionaire by that point, easily could have accepted. But Diddy reportedly turned him down, demanding 10 times that amount. And Maisie isn't the only one who's spoken out. There have been whispers for years that Diddy used his position of power to exploit the very artists he claimed to be helping.
Took Sean Diddy Combs into custody. He's seen in this video entering the Park Hyatt Hotel in Midtown Manhattan with others when agents from Homeland Security Investigations approach and separate him. They place Combs under arrest and lead him out the front door in handcuffs.
And the contracts. Let's just say they've been described as restrictive and unfair by more than a few people. There's a narrative out there that Diddy kept his artists financially tied to Bad Boy, even long after their careers had peaked. It's not hard to imagine how frustrating that must have been for the artists who had trusted him to guide them to success, only to later realize they were stuck in deals that benefited Diddy far more than themselves.
It's always like, I saw I go upstairs and these dudes are like right on the couch. And then I go in this room and these guys are and it's like.
And pros. Like, apparently he was getting male gigolos to fuck girls.
Girls?
Yeah, that was one of the rumors, like the
Male
freak off. So he would
gigolos.
hire the professional dicks to have sex with the girls. And I think he would watch, allegedly. That's what was alleged, I think.
But financial exploitation is just one part of the story. Diddy's infamous parties have been the stuff of legend for decades. These weren't your average Hollywood get-togethers. These were luxurious, over-the-top affairs that only the most elite could attend. And sure, from the outside, it all looked like harmless fun. Celebrities, music, beautiful people, and a seemingly endless supply of whatever anyone wanted. But behind the scenes, these parties have long been rumored to be something much darker. People who attended have come forward with stories that paint a very different picture of what went on behind closed doors.
Caligula.
Okay, so then there's the question. It's like, can you take a completely normal person, give them power, and then they become that? Or does it take a power-hungry person that has this void that needs to be filled, and then when they are given that power, you see the worst version of them?
Ask your CIA boy. I bet he's got the answers. I bet he knows the exact formula.
To corrupting somebody or to...
What happens? Like what happens to these people?
One of the most talked about incidents happened in 1999 when Diddy, his then girlfriend Jennifer Lopez, and rapper Shine were involved in a nightclub shooting in New York City. Diddy was at the height of his fame at the time, and the incident only added fuel to the fire of speculation surrounding him. Shine ended up taking the fall and was sentenced to 10 years in prison, while Diddy somehow walked away unscathed. This only deepened the perception that Diddy was untouchable, that no matter what happened around him, he had the power, the money, and the connections to avoid any real consequences.
You know, I think in federal court and for these charges, they would say it's routine, but in the public realm, this is very significant just from who we associate Diddy being and everything we've seen him do over the decades. Like you said, this is quite the downfall to go from, I mean, we saw the mansions back in March that were raided by the feds. So to go from living in those mansions to being in a jail.
It wasn't just the 1999 shooting that raised eyebrows. Diddy's parties, especially his legendary white parties, were known for their exclusivity, attracting everyone from Hollywood A-listers to music industry heavyweights. But as glamorous as they seemed, there were always rumors swirling about what really went on at these events. Some people who attended these parties have hinted at the lengths Diddy went to in order to maintain his image as the ultimate host. The whispers of excess, of overindulgence, and of things going too far have followed him for years. And while most of these stories have remained just that, stories, they've played a big role in shaping the public's perception of Diddy as someone who might not always be what he seems.
That's what people were saying, and maybe everybody's a conspiracy theorist now, but that's what people were saying about the Diddy situation. Like when the feds rolled up, with the Hummers and shit, they were like, it wasn't about Diddy. It was about if there were tapes of powerful people there.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
They were the ones that called. They're like, I need to protect myself, so go in there with all the things and rip any tapes or any evidence.
Now, let's talk about the people Diddy surrounded himself with. Throughout his career, he was always seen with the industry's biggest names, but some of those associations have been questionable, to say the least. One name that comes up time and time again is Suge Knight, the infamous co-founder of Death Row Records, who's been linked to some of the most notorious events in hip-hop history. While Diddy and Suge were technically rivals, Diddy represented the East Coast, while Suge was a West Coast powerhouse. Their paths crossed in ways that have led to endless speculation about what really went down between them.
And I remember, I don't know if you know what his voice sounds like, but I felt like I was in the presence of his monster inside.
Diddy's connections didn't stop with Suge Knight. He was also known to roll with some pretty controversial figures, both in the music world and outside of it. His inner circle included bodyguards, managers, and other industry insiders who have since come forward with claims that paint a much darker picture of what it was like to work for Diddy. Some have said they witnessed things at his parties that they'll never forget, incidents that made them question just how far Diddy was willing to go to maintain his power and influence. And while these claims are often dismissed as rumors, they add to the growing sense that Diddy's success might not have been as clean-cut as it appeared.
This has to be a 100% culture shock. I can't imagine living a lifestyle of the incredibly rich and famous and then going into this very dark, impersonal, cold, austere facility.
There's also the matter of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry that defined much of the 1990s hip-hop scene. On the surface, it was a battle between two regions, with Diddy and Bad Boy Records on one side and Suge Knight, Shakur, and Death Row Records on the other. But as with everything in Diddy's world, there was more going on than met the eye. The rivalry wasn't just about music. It was personal, and it had real consequences. The violence that erupted between the two camps led to the demises of Shakur and the notorious B.I.G., events that are still shrouded in mystery and speculation. Diddy has always denied any involvement in the violence that claimed Biggie's life, but there are plenty of people who believe he knows more than he's letting on. After all, Biggie was his protege, and their relationship was closer than most artist-manager relationships. Some have even suggested that Diddy may have had a role in orchestrating certain events behind the scenes, though there's never been any concrete evidence to support those claims. Still, the fact that these rumors persist speaks volumes about how Diddy is perceived within the industry.
Replete with very, very serious and salacious allegations, including allegations that Combs had cameras.
And then there's the Jeffrey Epstein connection. Yeah, you heard that right. Diddy's name has popped up in conversations about the disgraced financier, with some people claiming that Diddy might have attended or even hosted certain events that Epstein was involved in. While there's no direct proof to connect Diddy to Epstein's more nefarious activities, the fact that these rumors exist at all is enough to make people wonder. After all, Diddy has always been a master at cultivating relationships with powerful people, so it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that they crossed paths.
That this is the end of the Diddy story as we know it.
But it's not just the conspiracy theories and wild rumors that have people talking about Diddy these days. Earlier this year, Diddy was arrested and indicted on some pretty serious charges, and things are not looking good for him. Authorities raided several of his properties, seizing evidence that allegedly links him to a series of crimes involving coercion and exploitation. The raids were part of an ongoing investigation into allegations that have been slowly coming to light over the past few years. But this time, the authorities seem to have enough to make something stick. One of the most shocking aspects of these investigations is that they don't just implicate Diddy. They suggest that there might be other high-profile figures involved as well. This is where things start to get really messy. When Joe Rogan and Andrew Schulz discussed the situation on Rogan's podcast earlier this year, they hinted that the raids on Diddy's properties might have been about more than just him. They suggested that some of Hollywood's elite could have been involved in some pretty shady activities and that the authorities were looking for any evidence that could link them to Diddy.
I mean, everybody hung with Diddy. That's the other tricky thing. Like, Diddy hung out with everybody. And I've spoken to a bunch of people who are like, yo, great dude, like, always there for you, never asked for a single thing.
Till 1 a.m.
And then freak off.
Everybody says, get out of the house.
Yeah.
It's like the gremlins start eating after midnight.
Rogan even dropped a bombshell during the conversation, alluding to the possibility that Prince Harry had been hanging out with Diddy around the time some of these alleged events took place. While there's no hard evidence to back that up, it's enough to make you stop and think. After all, Prince Harry's name has popped up in some pretty unexpected places over the past few years, and his ties to Hollywood through his wife, Meghan Markle, mean that he's no stranger to some of the industry's more exclusive circles. Andrew Schulz, for his part, echoed Rogan's sentiments, pointing out that Diddy had a reputation for hanging out with just about everyone in Hollywood. He suggested that the real reason behind the raids wasn't to gather evidence against Diddy himself, but to protect the powerful people who might have been caught up in his orbit. Schulz even joked that Diddy was probably a nice guy up until about 1 a.m., but after that, all bets were off. It's a funny line, but it speaks to something much darker. The idea that Diddy's public persona might be very different from who he is behind closed doors.
That clearly there is a criminal investigation underway and that they believe that there would be evidence of crimes in one or both of these homes.
The question that everyone's asking now is, how deep does this go? Are we about to see some of the biggest names in Hollywood get dragged into this scandal? And if so, what kind of fallout can we expect? There's a real sense that this could be just the tip of the iceberg and that the investigation into Diddy's activities might uncover some truly shocking revelations about the entertainment industry as a whole.
And a lot of the evidence, alleged evidence, that's been gathered in this case was from those 2 raids that were conducted on his personal homes in Miami and Los Angeles. And the indictment names the things seized that he allegedly made videos of these performances that have been named freak-offs.
What makes the situation even more intriguing is that Diddy has managed to stay so quiet about it all. Sure, he's denied the allegations, but for someone who's always been so vocal and in the spotlight, his silence is deafening. Some people are speculating that he's staying out of the public eye because he knows how bad things could get if more information comes to light. Others think he's trying to distance himself from the scandal in the hopes that it will blow over. But with so many people coming forward and so much evidence reportedly being gathered, it's hard to imagine that happening. What's even more unsettling is that some of Diddy's closest associates have started to turn against him, or at least distance themselves from him. It's almost like they sense that the walls are closing in and don't want to get caught in the crossfire. This isn't just about Diddy anymore. It's about protecting themselves and their own reputations. And as the investigation continues, we're likely to see more and more people trying to cut ties with him before things get any worse.
The issue is, it seems as though he wants to kind of like exert power and dominance over people who don't really want it.
As we move forward, it's clear that Diddy's empire is on shaky ground. The man who once seemed untouchable is now facing some very serious allegations, and it doesn't look like he'll be able to charm his way out of this one. But the real question is, what happens next? With so many people involved and with the investigation still ongoing, it's impossible to predict how this will all play out. But one thing's for sure, this is a story that's far from over.
The special housing unit is a 24-hour lockdown unit, which means that any movement within that unit is controlled and coordinated, and no inmate moves outside of his cell without being in full restraints, to include leg irons, handcuffs, a belly chain, and at least 2, if not 3 staff members escorting them.
And that brings us to the real heart of the matter, Diddy's inner circle. Those who stood by him all these years and those who might have turned a blind eye to what was really going on behind the scenes. Are they just as guilty, or are they victims of manipulation too? Whatever the case, one thing is certain. The truth, as they say, always comes out. And when it does, Hollywood might never look the same again. With that said, let's dive deeper into Diddy's early career and the network of loyalty he built around him, a network that might now be crumbling under the weight of all these revelations. So, Diddy's empire isn't just built on the music, the parties, or the endless flow of celebrity connections. It's built on loyalty, or at least the appearance of it. But here's the thing. In Hollywood, loyalty is a slippery concept. It's all about power, influence, and sometimes who can protect whom. And in Diddy's case, the big question is, has that loyalty started to crumble? Because if there's one thing we've learned from the entertainment industry, it's that when the walls start closing in, people who were once fiercely loyal can turn on you in an instant to save themselves.
Problems that the defense has brought up originally, but it seems like, just from reading this 14-page indictment, that there is enough physical evidence to perhaps get a conviction in this case. We shall see. These are allegations.
To really understand how Diddy got to where he is today, we have to go back to the beginning. His success didn't happen overnight. He didn't just appear on the scene fully formed as the mogul we know today. He had to hustle, grind, and, most importantly, build connections with powerful people who could open doors for him. And trust me, those connections weren't just about music. They were about positioning himself in the right circles, knowing the right people, and making sure that every move he made was strategic. Back in the early 90s, Diddy, then known as Sean Combs, was just a kid from Harlem trying to make a name for himself. He started as an intern at Uptown Records, working under Andre Harrell, a music executive who basically gave Diddy his first real shot in the industry. Harrell saw something in the young, ambitious Combs and gave him the chance to prove himself. And Diddy, well, he took that opportunity and ran with it. It's said that Diddy was relentless, working around the clock and doing whatever it took to make sure he stood out. That hunger for success is what set him apart from so many others trying to break into the industry at the time.
Well, either way, if you got to run to a private island because your evil doings is doing so much and they storming your house, it's one of these.
But here's where things get interesting. Even back then, Diddy wasn't just about the music. He knew that to really make it big, he had to do more than just produce hits. He had to create a network of loyalty, a network of people who would stand by him, support him, and defend him no matter what. And that's exactly what he did. He built relationships with some of the most powerful people in the industry, people who could help him climb the ladder faster than anyone else. But as we've seen time and time again, those relationships can come with a price. Diddy's early career was marked by his ability to form alliances with key players in the music industry, many of whom owed him for the success he helped them achieve. Take the notorious B.I.G., for example. Biggie was one of Diddy's biggest discoveries and a major reason for Bad Boy Records' early success. Their relationship wasn't just professional, it was personal. Diddy and Biggie were tight, and their bond helped solidify Diddy's place as a major player in the industry. But even then, there were whispers about how much control Diddy had over Biggie's career. Some people speculated that Diddy's influence wasn't always in Biggie's best interest, that maybe he was using his power to keep Biggie and other artists dependent on him. And let's not forget about Mase, who was another huge name under Diddy's label. Mase has openly talked about how he felt trapped by his contract with Bad Boy Records, unable to fully regain control over his own music. It's a story we've heard from multiple artists who worked with Diddy, this idea that he exerted so much control over them that they couldn't escape his shadow even after they'd had major success. There's always been this underlying tension in Diddy's relationships with his artists, as if the loyalty he demanded from them came with strings attached.
Well, if he really was filming everybody, I mean, he had a lot of people at those parties, right?
But Diddy's network wasn't just about the artists he signed. It extended far beyond that. He made it a point to align himself with powerful people in Hollywood, business, and even politics. And that's where things get even murkier. Because when you start mingling with people who have that kind of influence, the stakes get higher and the secrets get darker. Over the years, Diddy's been associated with some pretty controversial figures, and there's always been speculation about what really went on behind closed doors. For instance, his close ties to people like Suge Knight and other major players in the East Coast-West Coast hip-hop rivalry have raised questions about the extent of Diddy's involvement in some of the more dangerous aspects of the industry. While Diddy has always maintained that he had nothing to do with the violence that plagued the rivalry, there are plenty of people who believe he knows more than he's letting on.
It's a lot of people.
It's not just the music business. It's like, it's the extortion business.
Well, I mean, the rap game was crazy. That's a thing a lot of people don't realize is like, back in the day, especially like early rap game, you weren't just going to play at, what's the random theater that you would play in LA? What's like a big theater?
And then there's the matter of Diddy's parties. Those infamous gatherings that everyone's heard about, but few really know the full story behind. Sure, on the surface, they seemed like glamorous, star-studded events where the biggest names in Hollywood and music would come together to celebrate. But according to some people who were there, those parties were about more than just having a good time. There have been whispers for years that Diddy used these events to cement his power and influence, making sure that the people in his orbit stayed loyal to him. And some of those whispers suggest that the price of loyalty was higher than anyone could have imagined. But here's the thing. When you build a network based on power and control, it can all come crashing down if the people you surrounded yourself with start to feel like they're trapped. And that seems to be exactly what's happening now. As the investigation into Diddy's activities continues to heat up, more and more people from his past are starting to come forward with stories that paint a very different picture of the man we thought we knew.
Why doesn't the government want him to turn himself in? Because then they can't ask for detention. So they go and they arrest him. They arrest a guy who came to New York to turn himself in.
One of the most shocking developments has been the revelation that some of Diddy's former associates are now cooperating with authorities. These are people who were once part of his inner circle, who attended his parties, worked for him, and benefited from his success. And now they're speaking out, sharing details that could potentially bring Diddy's entire empire crashing down. It's like watching a house of cards slowly start to collapse, one piece at a time.
Do you believe Diddy is a dangerous person?
Yes.
What's even more fascinating is the idea that some of these people might have been quietly waiting for the right moment to turn on Diddy. Think about it. If you've been part of his world for years, watching as he amassed power and influence, but feeling like you were never truly free from his control, wouldn't you jump at the chance to finally break away? And with the investigation now in full swing, it seems like that moment has arrived. Of course, not everyone in Diddy's circle is turning against him. There are still plenty of people who are standing by his side, at least publicly. But the question is, how long will that loyalty last? Because as more details come to light, it's becoming harder and harder to ignore the fact that Diddy's world is unraveling. And in Hollywood, loyalty only goes so far. At some point, people are going to start looking out for themselves, especially if they think that staying loyal to Diddy could potentially hurt their own careers or reputations.
There's people on both sides, right? There's the people on the right that are trying to nail the people that are on the left with this. There's people that are journalists that are trying to nail the people that are involved in this.
This is it,
And they've managed to keep that list from coming out, which shows you how powerful certain people are. That should show you a lot. That should be terrifying.
And let's not forget about the FBI. The investigation into Diddy's activities isn't just about him. It's about the entire network of people who helped him rise to power and maintain his influence. The FBI has been gathering evidence for months, and there are rumors that they've been looking into some of the biggest names in Hollywood. The idea that Diddy's associates might be implicated in the investigation has people on edge wondering just how deep this whole thing goes. One of the key aspects of this investigation is the idea that Diddy's power wasn't just built on talent and business acumen. It was built on secrets that he's been keeping for years about himself, about his associates, and about the industry as a whole. And if those secrets start to come out, it could have a ripple effect that reaches far beyond Diddy's own career. There's a sense that we're on the verge of something huge, something that could expose the dark underbelly of Hollywood in a way we've never seen before. And Diddy, with all his connections and all his power, could be the key to unlocking it. But the real question is, will he take the fall alone, or will others in his network be dragged down with him?
That he controlled every aspect of her life. He is accused of frequently beating her and would hide her in hotel rooms for days until the bruising and signs of abuse were gone.
And that brings us to the concept of betrayal. In an industry where loyalty is often based on convenience rather than true friendship, it's not hard to imagine that some of Diddy's closest associates are already thinking about how they can distance themselves from him. We've seen it happen before. When someone in Hollywood is facing serious allegations, the people around them start to disappear one by one until they're left standing alone. So, Diddy's saga is a cautionary tale about the fine line between loyalty and exploitation in the world of fame and power. As the walls begin to close in, questions linger. Are the artists who once trusted him complicit in his schemes? Or are the artists who once trusted him complicit in his shame? Or are they merely victims of his ruthless ambition? And how far will Diddy's silence take him as this storm brews? Viewers are encouraged to share their thoughts in the comments. What do they think about Diddy's alleged actions? And who do they believe might be next to turn against him? Until next time, stay curious and let's keep the conversation going